Hello again, everyone. I'm Jimmy Key, and welcome to Four State Focus. Today, I have the honor of talking about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I have Brett Engler with the State's Attorney's Office and Kate Hansen, who is a victim, and we're going to talk about a subject that needs a little bit more focus on it because it happens way too often. Brett, Kate, welcome, and thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
An important time for you guys to communicate with the public, which is what we are here to do.
So in Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a lot of our community partners try to put on some type of outreach to victims. We know that historically 1 in 4 women are severely hurt in an intimate partner violence relationship. Men can also be victims of intimate partner violence, so it's very important to raise awareness. So in October, the State's Attorney's Office likes to join with our community partners, like Hartley House. I know that they're putting on Walk a Mile in their shoes. We like to get out and put the message forward, and there's really no better way to do that than with a victim like Kate, a survivor like Kate, putting her story out there to let others know that there's help and there's hope and you're not alone in your suffering.
Kate, this is something that you obviously are a big part of, making the communications to the community and to victims and to everybody involved in domestic violence. Do you find this helps in the healing process? Do you find that this, every time that you have a success story, does it make you feel any better, or does it probably would never make the pain lessen, but how does it make you feel to participate in this?
I think that's a great question, and honestly, it really does. I think that you're always thinking, if this story, if this testimony or my testimony of this story is to help even one person, then it's like you said, it's never okay, but it's worth it, and you're just so happy to see anybody touched or supported by it. So it is healing. It warms your soul. You're just so grateful for the opportunity to honestly still be alive and be able to assist others.
Okay. There's a lot of partnerships. You guys deal with a lot of everybody from the police department to some mental health organizations. Discuss your partnerships with the community organizations or other advocacy groups that help get your message out to.
So on behalf of Charlie Smith, the state's attorney here in Frederick, I run the domestic violence unit, and you cannot prosecute domestic violence in a vacuum. You cannot police your way out of it solely. You have to be connected to community partners. So in the unit that Charlie has in his office, it's an integrated unit, meaning felonies and misdemeanors are prosecuted by the same prosecution team. That means a protective order violation all the way up to homicide. If it's intimate partner violence related, the same team is going to handle it. So we get to know our victims from hopefully the first time that they've reported is the time that we get to intervene with them. And intervention doesn't just mean policing. It means speaking to Hartley House, referring them to resources, having meaningful relationships with the hospital, specifically the forensic unit at the hospital that does sexual assault kits, strangulation kits, and collects evidence on our victims. As I said, Hartley House, the hospital, DSS, CPS, mental health, as you said, some of our substance abuse providers, parole and probation who monitors offenders. Those are all critical people to have at the table when you're discussing intimate partner violence, because a victim may not trust 1 or 2 people, but they may trust another person.
Understood.
And it's very, very sensitive. So we have a domestic violence coordinating council here in the county that involves an elected official, Charlie Smith, the sheriff's office, parole and probation. All of the community partners are at that table to see what are the gaps and how can we be improving things. We also have a fatality review team, so when a case is adjudicated, and there has been a domestic violence fatality, once everything has been adjudicated, we come back as a team to figure out were there gaps that we could improve on for the future, so that our main goal is homicide prevention. Obviously, prosecutors are on the response end of something that happens,
Right.
but we're also very involved in investigation and prevention. So domestic violence fatality review teams, when we do have that unfortunate occurrence, we need to learn if there are any lessons to be learned as to how things could have ended up differently for this victim.
I've seen it a lot in my upbringing, and it's something that's very near and dear to me. Kate, how do you plug in to as part of the victim end of this equation? How do you plug into into what Brett does?
I think Brett really hit it on the, just hit it right on the nose. It's so, domestic violence is so multifaceted. It's so complex, and there's so many aspects that need to be taken into consideration to, see it through to success and future freedom and future safety. And I think that, wherever I can tell my story, it's just, again, it's such a joy. If and how that can help anybody. And then also, coincidentally, working within the legal field now and trying to advocate for lots of other victims and victim survivors and their families, talking to different behavioral health organizations, you name it. Again, it's like domestic violence touches every single area.
Well, this all ends up in the courts, okay? And we're going to talk about David Hansen, who was sentenced to 93 years in prison. To walk me through that.
Yeah. So David Hansen's case came in, I believe it was in November, if I'm not mistaken, of 2021. So it's been some time. And Kate has come such a long way. But David Hansen was an abusive partner to Kate. She was married to him. She was abusive throughout the marriage. I'll let her get into that later. But he began after their divorce. And what I want some survivors to know is that abuse doesn't necessarily end after a divorce, right? They had a long, long history of abuse. Domestic violence is about power and control. When Mr. Hansen felt that the power of his domination over Kate was threatened by her seeking divorce, by seeking perhaps some type of custody, he started threatening her. She got death threats, including make peace with God, and him saying that he would kill her, which led Ms. Hansen to then seek a protective order in the state of Virginia. When we first heard about it in Maryland is because Ms. Hansen worked downtown Frederick. Mr. Hansen decided to drive from Virginia and accost her outside of her car. He pointed a loaded handgun at the back of her head, and the state's evidence was that he attempted to shoot that firearm. What happened next, I think, can only be described as an intervention, perhaps a divine intervention. I know Kate describes it that way. Is a third party, a bystander, a good Samaritan, was there greeting her at her place of work, just saying good morning. And what the state believes is that Mr. Hansen did not necessarily see that individual. He came around the car. When he pointed the handgun, the individual started shouting, get out, he's trying to kill you, something to that effect, he's got a gun, which startled him. And the gun did not successfully fire due to user error. The pressure that individual, that good Samaritan, placed on him to get out caused him to run. He placed the handgun in the creek. The third party, the Good Samaritan, followed him, was able to tell FPD where that handgun would be, which is exactly where they located it. He was able to tell police where he ran. They found him, I believe, in the area of Hope Circle. He had ditched a disguise. He came up behind Kate with a mask on, a wig, and a beanie, ditched those items in a dumpster. Some people saw him do that. Then he ran. He was trying to get over a fence to his car, where he was tackled by Frederick City Police. Due to the wonderful actions of that person, Kate's alive today, due to the fast response of FPD and the investigation by Detective Matt Irons, who's now in Thurmont, spent a long career with the city. We had a wonderful case as prosecutors. We had DNA off of an item at the scene. We had a fingerprint. We had Mr. Hansen obviously in custody shortly by the scene. We had his car. The gun was registered to him. So there really was a very strong case that we were able to prosecute. The jury returned multiple verdicts of guilty, and in sentencing he got a very stiff sentence, 93 years, which was a message that this will not be tolerated in Frederick.
Involved in a protective order, what are the police expected to do? What can they do? How can they be helped to do what they have to do to protect a victim? In
terms of this case, what I will say in terms of protective orders, and people who do this type of work will say this to victims, for the most part, and I want to emphasize, the most respondents will comply with protective orders. They are a good tool for victims to have.
Okay.
But victims do need to know their specific offender and what their risk is. And it's very important to consult with experts like Hartley House or Hartley House Legal, talk to other survivors, think about your own situation, because for some, it is a piece of paper. And for some men specifically, I believe he might have been one of them, that says you get a protective order and I'll run right through it.
Yeah.
He would tell her
It was
that.
in the car.
Yeah.
It was in the car.
Mr. Hansen's protective order was in his car when police executed a search warrant. So for him, it was not a deterrent. For some, it can be a catalyst, right? Because power and control is the basis of domestic violence. I want people to understand that. When that power and control is threatened with a legal piece of paper instituted by his victim, so someone who he thought he would control for life, that it can be a breaking point. And it is very likely that victims, some can be in more danger when they seek a protective order than when they don't, than when they're actually in the relationship. But it depends. So it's very, very important for victims to consult experts, think of their offender in particular, and do what they need to do to feel safe. So yes, we're constantly trying to enforce these orders. Law enforcement does a wonderful job. I know our sheriff's office, this particular order was out of Virginia, so I can't necessarily speak to their process, but our sheriff's office will look for registered firearms of the offender and try to do what they can. If we have probable cause that there's a firearm somewhere, you can do a search warrant. There's lots of different things that you can do, but I understand that perspective that many victims are killed when the order is active, and how do we stop that? It is a very difficult question.
How does the victim respond to that? I mean, they come to your office for, help and protection, but once the court trial is over, this person is still on the loose. How do you deal with that kind of trauma?
Yeah, and what I can say from the prosecutor's angle, and I'll defer to Kate in a moment, but you always want to have a good working relationship with your victim. You want to be able to tell them that I, as a prosecutor, can only control what charges I bring, and the charges that I bring have to be supported by evidence that I think I can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So that doesn't necessarily mean every crime is going to be prosecutable, or something that is worth the victim testifying. So we're always kind of talking to our victims about that. What are the likelihoods that he's going to go away for life? This was a case that the likelihood was that he was going to get some significant time. Not every case is like that. So yes, it's all safety planning, and it's all connecting your victim to what resources she can have if something happens. Like you said, Jimmy, the jury may not convict.
Yeah.
And you cannot control that as a prosecutor. You can put forth your most compelling case with the evidence that you can prove, but also have in the back of your mind that these are real people, these are real people's lives. I cannot directly control the sentence, although I have the right as the state's attorney, assistant state's attorney, to put forth my sentencing recommendation and do my best to make sure I'm putting on the best, most compelling case forward, not only for the jury, but for the judge at sentencing. This is why this offender needs to be locked away for close to the maximum sentence. And then what's also important is that victims have the right to give a victim impact statement when there's a plea or a trial that results in a guilty finding. So Kate utilized that opportunity. It's not mandatory, but judges want to hear from victims, right? In addition to the facts that the victims put forward to the fact finder, the jury, at sentencing, the victims can say, how did this crime affect me? What do I want the court to know about that, about the effects on me? What do I think will keep me safe? And Kate did a great job about that with doing that for the judge that handed down the sentence in this case. So can you talk about that a little bit, Kate?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Brett. I think that's such a great point, too, with regard to, it's like safety planning. Like you said, knowing the perpetrator and their patterns and their habits, safety planning with anybody that you know that's close to you, open lines of communication with law enforcement, state's attorney's office, and really advocating for yourself no matter what, and never giving up. I think that's a big part of what they want you to do, is to kind of give up. Again, more that coercive control, and you just keep at it. And part of that self-advocacy is that opportunity, utilizing that opportunity to do the victim impact statement. And I think it's so I'll share this. I started it very early on, and our case it went on for a number of years. As you all know, the sentencing just happened earlier this year. So from 2021 to now, that's honestly a lifetime for a victim's healing process, survivor's healing process. And so I started my victims advocacy statement much earlier, and put it away, would add things, take things away. And it was really interesting how healing that was, because from what I started with to what I ended, and how there was no fear anymore. A lot of that goes to like the prosecution and keeping him behind bars, and knowing that they were doing their best to keep us safe. But I told the judge, I'm like, I do not think that I know we will never be safe if he's out. We will never. And just, not holding back. Again, it's very complex, and I think it really tugs at victims' heartstrings with their combination of, family, your so-and-so's, your children's father, what have you. But it's just not holding back and knowing that this cycle of abuse and control doesn't really ever go away. I think it just takes another shape. And so it's advocating for longer sentences for domestic violence abusers, because, if you and your kids are young, that's years that you're going to have to deal with something.
Now let's talk about continue into your healing process. You gave that victim statement. You looked at the defendant and you looked at the judge and you said, this is what it is. That had to make you feel a little bit more, not powerful is not the right word, but somebody is now listening to me and yeah, go ahead, talk to me about that.
I finally have a space where I'm encouraged, not just quote unquote allowed, but I'm encouraged to talk about this and really speak my heart and know that I'm safe to do so, because you're, within the capacity of the courtroom. And I think it's one of those situations where it's hard to say, there's no real winning per se. It's a sad situation all the way around, right?
Yes.
But it's where there's, excuse me. Yeah, I think it's just one of those situations where you're so grateful. You never thought you'd be there. You never thought you'd even get there to have that moment to advocate and tell a judge,
right,
I do not trust this person ever being out. They will get out, they will, harass and endanger my life more, our children's lives. And it's kind of the shock and awe of, because we went through years. This was well over a decade of very, very intense, severe domestic violence. So by the time I finally got there, it was, and then the judge hearing me and hearing the prosecution and us, essentially agreeing based on how much time that she gave. Like, these people deserve to be safe. You have to go over here because this is not okay. This is not okay. These children deserve to grow up with at least one healthy parent that is trying to do right. And it was, it's still kind of, when I look back at it, it's still kind of shocking,
You brought up the children. A lot of times children are used as pawns in a situation like this. How do you deal with the tug of war that goes on when kids are involved?
Yeah. So from the prosecution angle, we know a lot more than we did when some of our older victims are victimized. When I have victims who've described in the 80s, they would be victimized and a police officer would come and the kids would be there and the police officer would say, well, do you want to press charges? And the offender would be standing right there. And of course the victim, out of fear and unclarity about what was going to happen, would say no. And then the police would leave. We don't have that type of law anymore. And like you said, it's really advanced to the point where if the victim seeks help, she can seek help. He or she can seek help. What we also know is that witnessing domestic violence as a child is what's called an adverse childhood experience. So young men who witness domestic violence can become more likely to be abusive. Women who witness domestic violence can be more likely to become victims themselves. And that's not necessarily a sentence. A lot of people fight the other way, right? That they witnessed it as a child and they said they would never do it and they become an advocate against it, which sounds like you are as well. You are, Jimmy, and that's an amazing thing. But what we know is that having a child witness their parent, particularly their mother, be treated harshly or to be physically hurt. I've had cases where kids have tried to pull Nerf guns on their dad to keep their dad off their mom. I mean, heartbreaking detail after heartbreaking detail, and that sticks with a child. What's worse than seeing your parent be tortured and you can't do anything about it because you're too small? And sometimes kids are physically actually in the middle. I've had kids be thrown around, any variety of things. So in terms of the law, we have the Child Advocacy Center here. Police are much more attuned to how to deal with children in these situations, how to protect them as much as possible. DSS will respond if kids are involved, and just offer hope, counseling. Protective orders can protect children as well. if the judge thinks that that child is in danger. What I will say, in the past couple of years, we've gotten a new law in the books that if a child over the age of 2 is a direct witness to the crime, the state can seek a sentence of an enhancement of 5 years. So I've had cases where a child has witnessed it, and instead of perhaps a 10-year on a misdemeanor on second-degree assault, I can get 15. That extra 5 is an acknowledgement that this affects children. So we do seek that in appropriate circumstances, while being cognizant that we don't want to put children on the stand if we can avoid it, but sometimes it's just so obvious that children are seriously affected by this. So I want people to know that. I'll defer to Kate. Living through this and becoming a survivor as a mom, it must have been very, very difficult.
I honestly, life is hard. I've been through a lot. Everybody has in their own way, but hands down the hardest situation that I've ever had to deal with. I still get, it's obviously very near and dear to me. It chokes me up a little bit, but when we were talking about kids, it just made me think of, it just made me think of my son, who, when we were going through the whole process, and his whole thing was, you can't ever, and my kids were very young, I should add that. I didn't have anything to share with them other than, Peep, there's a team that's helping to keep us safe, but I had nothing definitive I could share with them. But they wanted to know when it was over, the time. And obviously all of the rest of that, they don't know. That's for much older specialists, all of that. But I did, my son, I put this in my victim impact statement, actually. It just haunts me. He had said, I just need to know how long we're going to be safe for. Yeah, and I still think about that. So when I told them, when I told the children he's going away for a very, very long time, it was like they didn't even know what to do for a second. I think I told you this, one of my children had said, now we can finally live like happily ever after, her words exactly. And I was so taken back by that, because you don't, and they had seen and experienced a lot, but the effects of all of it, the prosecution process, they feel everything, they see everything, they feel everything. And just having that peace where they can live and be safe and do activities, go to school, and this isn't a thing, was just so profound to see, to hear them, to make statements like that. And yeah, it is hands down one of the most difficult situations that I've ever had to deal with, because you're dealing with courts, you're dealing with family, you're dealing with threats, you're dealing with your emotional well-being. Can I go to work today? Is he going to follow me there? Can I drop my children off at daycare or school? Is he going to show up and take them? Do I go back to court? Is he going to do, pull this or do that? It's like this never-ending cycle.
Yeah, I hear you. There was a point in time where there was no such thing as child protective services, or you could be a pawn, you could be dragged back and forth, and kids can. You're right. They could go one of two ways, and thank goodness a lot of us went the right way. But I hate to see this problem propagate itself through children of people who have been involved in domestic violence. I'll give you the opportunity to make some last comments, and we will put this one in the books. Brett, go ahead if you would.
So I guess my story about this case is it's a story of survival. It's a story of a mom who wouldn't give up. It's a story of domestic violence and how it can escalate over time. Kate endured years of physical, emotional, financial, mental abuse, and it's very common for victims to have that and not seek help because they don't necessarily know how. There's where to start. As I said earlier, it can be very, very dangerous for victims to leave, and this case proves that. When she left, that was when he decided that he was going to do something to permanently alter the course of her life. So what I want to say is just thank you to survivors like Kate. Thank you to third-party Good Samaritans who stand up and put themselves in literal harm's way for this person that he barely knew.
Barely knew, yeah.
And without him, I don't know where we would have been. And it was on video. It was very disturbing. And I want to say thank you to Charlie Smith for his commitment to these victims, to my victim witness coordinator, Kim Murdoch, to my investigator, everyone who helped us along the way in the years process that this case took to get to a 93-year sentence. But most of all, I want to thank Kate. It is not easy, and not all of my victims are in a place where they could come on a radio show and speak about their experiences from a place of safety, a place of calm, and a place of deep, deep knowledge and empathy for these victims. So I want to say, congratulations to Kate, because she really is
Thank you
safe,
so much, Brett.
Safe and wonderful woman.
Thank you so much. You're so kind. I owe you all just the world. I cannot thank you all enough for just the unwavering support that they put into years of prosecution in a difficult case, very difficult person, in dealing with him and all that kind of ensued for years during the case.
We've been talking to Brett Engel from the Maryland State's Attorney's Domestic Violence Unit, and Kate Hansen, the victim that has worked with that office and has become a survivor after a long, arduous period of domestic abuse. And thank God the threat was finally neutralized. You've been listening to 4-State Focus. I'm Jimmy Key. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next weekend, and this is not the last that you've heard about this particular issue, because we plan on having you guys back in here time and time again until we make some progress and make an impact anywhere we can. Because if we can make an impact somewhere, we're going to try. I'm Jimmy Key. Thanks you very much for listening. This has been 4-State Focus. Have a good weekend, and thanks for listening, everybody.